basic, they have a model, wherein they have some 8 to 9 websites, and you have to manage, it's just like what you have in Times, right? You have a website for cricket, a website for travel, for news. And there I started working as a product manager, and learn the basics of how you track the traffic on your website, how the ads works, like how this entire the click business work, wherein you can have a lot of ads on your websites, and whoever comes in, that's the basic business model they have. So there I started working closely with the designers and understood that. So basically what a UI UX is, I wasn't really aware of. And it was morely it was more about my background of working with the entrepreneurship cell of the college and having a know how startups work. So that really helped me there to land the first job. But yes, it was it was something which I didn't expect. Nothing was planned for me, there was no roadmap for me, and it was more about hit and try. So yeah, that was the first 1.5 year where the basics can you hear me? Hello.
Yeah, how did that happen? Like your first role in product, like you got it right out of college. So
Yeah, so it was a college placement, and even I'm surprised by that, how that happened. So the company had come, and they were looking for people who could join them in product management.
great.
And throughout my college, one of my seniors, he told me that if ever you really want to understand how a company works, you need to be a product manager. And that really struck me, and I was fantasized by the role itself.
Right.
So yeah, it was more about so everything I learned about product management was mostly on the first job itself, and getting to know how a product manager interacts with the various verticals, technology, design, business. So that was it. It was good enough to give me a head start, but still, it was more about liking the entire business setup of the company. So yeah, for me, it was a little challenging at the beginning, but then ultimately I switched to Oxygen. Oxygen is one of the wallet companies. They had a basic fintech setup, and that was the next step for me. I moved to Gurgaon, and then right from entertainment, I was into fintech, and that was quite a shift for me, working into the wallet industry, understanding the various payment instruments in India, and how it is tightly controlled by the guidelines set by RBI. So that was the next role, and it was a bit more interesting because the kind of people I had in the office, they had much more experience, and an experience from various backgrounds. People had worked in e-com, people had worked with payment companies themselves, and there was a lot to learn. And fintech itself is a challenge, right? You're trying to ensure that a lot of people move towards your wallets, and your your they move the entire setup of demonetization, that people start using credit cards more and this and that. And that was a nice learning curve for me over there. I worked with various verticals of UPI, how the credit cards work. I handled the payment gateway there. So yeah, that went for another 1.5 year. Then I finally moved to Zomato, where I've been working for past 2.5 years. So I mean, this is a different ballgame altogether, right? So for the first year, I was working with the logistics team and handling the apps used by our rider partners. And for last 1.5 year, I'm part of the merchant platform, basically leading the experience for our restaurant partners, their app, their websites, and even the accounting, how we send them the payouts and everything else. Yeah.
Right. So if you go in to the detail, the work that you're doing right now would be like your user would be the restaurant owner or the restaurant.
Yes, exactly. The restaurant partners, yes.
Okay, okay. So like maybe can you elaborate like what a product manager does like in your scenario, let's say in your current product. So what do you do?
Yeah, so in my scenario, you can imagine Zomato to be a three-way marketplace. We have a customer who places the order, and then there's a restaurant partner who accepts the order, fulfills the order, and there's a rider partner who delivers the order. So I mean, having said that, I have worked in I'm working with the merchant platform. Doesn't really mean that I don't. I mean, I'm not really involved in what is happening at the consumer end. It is a joint exercise, right? You need to understand the entire ecosystem. So for me, the day-to-day work is understanding what are our short-term and long-term goals for our restaurant partners. How do we really want to ensure that they are growing, right? So we are essentially facilitating businesses, platform where these businesses can grow, right? I mean, these are all your entrepreneurs, right? They have their own restaurant, they have the restaurant chains. So how to ensure that they are getting decent number of orders, and they are being able to fulfill them, while ensuring that our end customer, which are maybe people like you and them themselves, are getting the best experience. So being a being a very important fundamental part of the entire chain, they have to understand that what are the different standards we want to maintain as a platform, and how they can ensure that they understand and are able to fulfill the orders. So for me, you can say that the day starts with the and checking up the various metrics which we track on day-to-day basis. That, let's say, we launched a new feature. So how many of the restaurant partners are actually using it? How many of them are having troubles? I can check the data regarding how many queries have been raised, then understanding that what are the different problems they're facing. Probably picking up one of them and calling a few of the partners and understanding that what exactly, how are they being able to understand the interface. At times I also visit them nearby, I guess just would go on a 1 hour trip, and meet a couple of them, understand that what are the day-to-day problems. The next step is usually getting a it's the I mean, the day starts having a discussion with my engineers, and getting a an update on the various tracks that we are maintaining. For a product manager, he can have 5 6 projects which are going on in parallel. Some of them are at a more mature stage, some of them are at the initial stage. So that, I mean, it's very important that you unblock the developers by clarifying their doubts. Maybe something in the design which is them they're not understanding. So you need to ensure that your engineering team is everything is unblocked for them, and they are performing at their full potential. So that is a daily catch up. Post that, I would probably spend some time on designing some of the interfaces for the next set of features, and really checking that how can you further iterate it.
Right. So
And
when you talk
then
about, sorry to cut you off, but like
uh,
when you talk about design, like how much of it, like what do you do? Like what tools would you use for design? And like in general,
yeah.
what does a product manager need to know when it comes to
Yeah, okay. So see, for a product manager, design, it's one of the fundamental skill sets in terms of understanding. You don't really have to know how to design beautiful interfaces, right? But
right?
yes, when I talk about the UI UX, I mean, the UI is not just the different components or different colors you are looking at, at an app or a website. There's a
Right.
lot which goes behind that. Like, there's information architecture, that what are the important things you want your user to look at, which should grab their attention. I can have 4 5 links, but some of them have to be the primary one, some of them have to be the secondary one, which would ensure that they I mean, so essentially, when you open an app or a website, it should be very clear that what are we trying to do over here, right?
Right.
So in my case, let's say I want the restaurant partner to accept an order, and fulfill the various information pieces, there are customer instructions. He has to let us know when the order is ready, when it is picked up. So yeah, I mean, those are different items over there. So for a product manager, it is important to understand that what is the user journey, what all do you want your user to do, and you need to convey that to your designer so that he understands that and is able to replicate that into a good looking design. And then probably you can use the different copies, what kind of English or what kind of language you want to write over there. So you don't really have to be hands on a design tool. Like, let's say we use Figma. So Figma is is it's fairly detailed, and you can create beautiful interfaces over there. But yes, if you can create a basic wireframe, which can at least tell the designer that, okay, this screen would have these many components in this order. So that is, I think, enough for a product manager. And I mean, there's only one way to learn that. Let's use as many apps or as many websites you can. And I think that is how you develop your basic sense of design. I mean, you have to be a user yourself, and in case of product manager, you have to be a power user.
Right. 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 So like you said, so then you probably design things for the future. Like you're talking about your daily routine. So
Yeah, yeah. It's more about so again, I told you we can have 4 5 projects going on. one
Right.
is in the development stage and one is in the specking stage. When I say specking stage, for me it would be that I am writing down the different intricacies of the design of the feature, that what all is supposed to be done on the interface. And then when I'm ready with that information, that okay, these many elements are to be there, then I would like approach my design team and tell them, okay, this is what is supposed to be, and let's design that. So at times, what happens, since for me, it has been, I mean, Zomato is fairly, the designers are they're highly regarded over here, and a lot goes behind our designs, and
Right.
our apps really tell, talk about that a lot.
Right.
So for me, it's it really helps if I'm able to share some workload with them. Let's say if they have prepared a basic version of the design, then the the next iteration, a couple of tweaks, I mean, that I do myself. I don't really have to call a designer that, let's say for a button color change or a text change, that which I have to do myself. Yeah.
Right. Right. Got it. So, what is can you take us through the life cycle of, let's say, one sprint or like one feature that you roll out? So, it starts from ideation. Like, where does that come from? Where, like, does it
Yes.
come from somewhere, someone else, or like, do you have to think about? Uh,
To be very honest, the requirement can come from anywhere, right? And I mean, it's very important that as a product manager, if you understand that, you aren't supposed to be the only person who comes with idea, right? And you need to really be aware about. I mean, see, idea can really come from a user request. Like
right.
maybe I met a restaurant partner who said that, dude, this interface looks a little confusing, right?
Right.
And or maybe it can be a business stakeholder,
Right.
and they want to they, I mean, they are probably working behind certain metrics. They, let's say, they want to ensure that the number of queries which we receive from the merchants reduces, so that they can optimize the support staff.
Right.
Maybe it can be solved by a feature, right?
Right.
So those requests would come. Then internally also, as you are working on a product, you yourself know a couple of things that, okay, this thing can improve. Maybe you want to drive a certain metric. Like, let's say I want my restaurant partners to tell me when the order is ready. So if I want to ensure that that particular percentage increases, I would ensure that the particular the particular link or the button is more prominent on the screen. So those are the different experiments which you do throughout the product lifecycle. Maybe you'll have two different variants, and understand that, which one of them is working better for you.
Right.
So essentially, that is the ideation, right? The ideation can be improvising an existing feature or coming with a new feature altogether.
Right.
Then once you design it and really get it
So again,
reviewed
like
from
from
the.
ideation to like an idea pops up either from your user or from your
Hmm.
business team. How do
Hmm.
you how do you decide whether you want to go through with it or not? Like, how do you validate it basically? Is there would be
So.
validation, right? Like, because you'll have like so many ideas coming in even from the user, like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Right.
again, I think it's very important for you to understand your baseline metrics, that, what are you trying to drive? If that feature really fits into that. So, I mean, the answer either can be you just simply say no. But then whenever you're saying no, you need to tell them that why aren't you doing this feature? Because probably you don't even need that feature. That feature might not result in driving the key metrics. Let's say if I'm trying to improve the adherence of my restaurant partners, that they accept the order in time, and if the requested feature is not really sitting well with them, what I can do is that I can tell them, okay, this feature is, I mean, it can see, you can actually classify the features into two things. One are like the bread and butter which is required, and one are the bells and the whistles. The bells and the whistles can be taken up, let's say after 2 3 sprints again, right?
Right. Right.
So yeah, so it has to really fit in the long term roadmap. And but again, whenever I am saying, I'm rejecting a particular idea, I need to ensure that I'm telling them why it's happening so, right? But yeah, at times, I would validate it in terms of, how is it really fitting in in the entire journey of the user. uh, at all the times, I know for a fact that what all the different competitors are doing in the market, so I can validate that from the market itself. Maybe make a quick prototype and show it to the restaurants itself. If that clicks, then why not? We take up the feature.
Right. And then like you said, it's the design. Then you design it, and then
Yeah. So once the design is ready, I need to sit with my engineering team. And so, I mean, see, it's very important that you are not just pushing the new features or design to your engineering team. You need to take their ideas as well, because I mean, I'm telling you, some of the best ideas, or especially the innovative ideas, they come from the engineers. And you'll be surprised to know that, so I do that. I've started doing that, and every time a new design spec is ready, I would sit with my engineering team, take their feedback, and then ensure when everybody is on board, then only we go ahead with that. If even one of them is saying that, okay, this is looking a little confusing, we can probably try this and that, then of
Right.
course, we'll ensure that the entire team is on board for that.
Right. And then it's more of like following up, and like do you have to follow up or like basically get updates on what is happening, right?
So see, the way it happens is that, when you discuss a particular feature, firstly you need to understand that what is the current product backlog. What are the features you guys are really working on, and do you even have enough bandwidth to accommodate a new request? So that's a proper planned way, right? You have a roadmap
Right.
for entire quarter. You know the high level user stories that, okay, these are the different features we need to work on. These are the different features we need to experiment or iterate. So as per depending upon what is the priority and how you decide the priority, whether it's going to really impact those baseline metrics. If that is something which is going to do that, then you probably would prioritize it as, okay, yes, this is going to ensure that the short term targets we are achieving, it's going to fulfill that, so let's go for that. But that shouldn't really compromise your long term roadmap. Like a very basic example, right now we are going through this entire COVID-19 thing, and anything which would ensure that our restaurant partners are able to convey to our users that, okay, yes, like the food is we are following the proper hygiene like guidelines by WHO. We are taking the temperatures. You must have seen that Zomato started doing that. We take the temperature of the riders, convey that to user. So those features again have become very important for us. So it was very important that you work on those features and then you adjust the life beyond them, right, which are your steady state features.
Right. Got it.
So once you decide that, once the feature goes into the entire development cycle, the developers usually tell you that, okay, this is going to take 2 weeks, this is going to take 3 weeks, and then you have to follow up on a daily basis. So the follow up is not like, see, I mean, a lot of new product managers or PPL who are transitioning into this role, they get confused that taking updates mean that you need to ask them, where are we on this? Where are we on this? So that's not how it works, right? You need to trust them and ensure that you're not really you're only discussing if there are any issues. Otherwise, if somebody has told you that it'll take 5 days, you take their word for that and ensure that in between there are no roadblockers. That's it. But that doesn't mean that you would go every day and ask them, okay, tell me, give me the updates, give me the updates. I mean, that is not the right way of working with these developers. And you need to see, again, as a product manager, nobody reports you, right? I mean, the designers, the developers, they are working as a team, and you need to influence them with your leadership skills. That whatever features or ideas you are coming up, they're actually going to help us, right? And that is how you earn their respect. So you need to give them that much of space so that they're not bothering them again and again.
Right.
Yeah, so that's it. Yeah.
Right. So let's go back a little. Like when you started out, I mean, was there a big difference in the kind of work you did, or was it more or less the same? Like, so for someone starting out, is it little less? Is there a little less workload that you only have to handle a certain aspect of it, or something like that?
So again, when somebody starts out as a product manager, essentially, I mean, at the very beginning, you don't really get to work on big features because, even you are getting used to that. You are getting used to the entire setup, the ecosystem, and I would say that the first 1 or 2 months are mainly about understanding the ecosystem, right? Like let's say when I joined Zomato, it was very important for me to understand that what goes behind when somebody orders, when somebody places their order. Though I
Right.
was only handling the rider side of things, but if I don't understand how the entire chain works, then I won't really be able to work on features.
Right.
So see, I mean, it's very easy to get a little confused and overwhelmed by the sheer amount of complexities around you. So the best way is that you go and talk to the people, you talk to the engineers, you talk to the product managers, like what kind of problems are they working on, and see, in that process you understand that, okay, these components work in this way, right? And your task as a product manager, I mean, that is one of the things which even I was confused with at the very beginning, that you're not in a as a product manager, you're not supposed to only solve the problems. You
Right.
need to find the problems, and to find the problems you need to understand the system. Like, okay, what are our what are the tech constraints we have? If you want to do something really jazzy, why aren't we doing that? Because probably you don't have the tech for that, you don't have the bandwidth for that, right?
Right.
So you need to understand the current ecosystem constraints and then work with them.
Right.
So what I generally do is that, I mean, if I'm working towards a solution, I would make a version 0. The version 0 is like, whatever I have, that is I'm using to build this. And the version 1 would be the ideal state, that, okay, once like, a certain constraints are unblocked, then I would like, go for the version 1. So that is how you progress. See, you need to understand that it's an iterative process. You can't build like, a Taj Mahal in one go, right?
Right.
And you need to like really work towards that mentality, okay, that, it's a piece by piece thing, right?
Right.
Firstly, you come up with a very basic version, what we call as an MVP, the minimal viable product, right?
Right.
Which is there to test the hypothesis. Let's say I'll give you a very quick example. So like, we do in Zomato, we do have an onboarding process, like, how do we onboard our restaurant partners, right?
Right.
So that onboarding process, we are trying our best to make it like a do-it-yourself approach, where the restaurant partners themselves, like, find the web link, and they would go there and like, register themselves. But the process is very complex. It involves them uploading documents, verifying their credentials, numbers, this and that, bank account. So that entire like, product has been built on web. Now we were like, contemplating if we really want to push it on the mobile site or not. So we came up with a very basic idea that, okay, let's just give up a sign up link and ask them to give us their basic details. So that really helped me to understand, okay, is it really helping if I only put it on the app and people would download and like, sign up themselves. So like, we're getting a very good response, and that just proves the concept that if we build the full-fledged product, it would really help us. So these
Right.
are some of the decisions which you need to like, take up and like, do a quick experimentation without like, see, again, you call it like, with the low tech cost. A low
Right.
tech cost is like, building something with 2-3 days of effort compared to something which is being built for 2 months. So if you have the concept like validated, like, you just go ahead for the bigger project.
Got it. Got it. So again, in your early days, so like you got your first job as a product manager, but many others would be switching into a product role. So what did you like find the most challenging part, like in the early days, like
Hmm.
understanding getting into the role, like what was, so there are different aspects, like which was the biggest learning curve?
Okay, so I'll tell you one thing, that for product management, they are primarily like, five basic pillars, right? So
Right.
if you get some of them right, you're on the right path, right? So I'll start with them. One is your like, the basic design know-how.
Right.
Then you have analytical mindset.
Right.
Then you have your tech know-how, like, how a backend system works, what are different APIs, like, what kind of stack are we using, like, what is the difference between iOS and Android, right? That kind of understanding. What are like the databases, like, which one our team is using, how the entire I mean, if let's say if you click one button on your website, what goes on behind, that kind of a know-how. Then fourth would be understanding your customer, that what really is my customer, like, here in the app or in the website, right? And the fifth is stakeholder management, like, working with the entire team, with the business teams, with the design teams, and like, ensuring that everybody is aligned on the same page and working towards a common goal, like there is no ambiguity around it. So so if even like, you get two of these right out of these five, then I think you are like good to go, and you need to ensure that you are a champion in like at least one of them, right? So that is how, like, so I mean, let's say in Zomato, like, I can say, like, a lot of these people have at least three or four of these qualities, and they are like, really like, extraordinary people. But yeah, like, a lot of them have their own strengths and like, things they're working on. So there's never a weakness, right? You should always be like, in that state of mind where saying that, okay, I'm very good with UX and like, understanding my customer, but yes, I'm working on my tech know-how, right? So that is the kind of approach you need to take, right? Otherwise, what would happen, it's very easy to get overwhelmed. And for me, as a biggest learning curve was like, to really align the business stakeholders, because like, somebody would come up with a request, and like there's a way of talking to them, like, empathizing with them, telling them how we can be like, how can we further like, ensure that yes, we are doing this feature, but it'll take time. So you need to understand, you are managing a lot of different temperaments, right? In a day you're talking to 10 different people, but your temperament has to be constant, right? Otherwise it's very easy to get like, flushed or like, overwhelmed, that, how did he talk to me like that, this and that, like, so it's a lot confusing. So I think yeah, that takes time, and you of course need to be constantly working on your like, on your like, strong points, on your weak points, and that's how it goes.
Got it. Got it. So like for people entering into this, like, or who want to pursue product management roles, like let's take the example of an engineering grad. Like in
Hmm.
you were, like you said, like fortunate enough to directly land a PM role. But like for others, like what are realistic? I think like APM is a realistic role for someone graduating out of college, right?
When you say graduating out of college, is it like, from undergrad or
From
uh,
undergrad.
undergrad? So see, again, like, I think 5 years ago, like the entire product management landscape in India was still like, it was still developing.
Right.
And the role it still isn't like, well defined, like, in today's, like, today's times as well. But earlier, a lot less opportunities were there for people. Like cracking a product management internship was something I haven't heard of. And same goes for like, landing, like, as a fresher, as an undergrad. So yeah, things have definitely changed. Like, a lot of companies are like, like, trusting the success, like, in the product managers, and they're hiring many product managers, ensuring that they are able to drive the business metrics and they like, and the business goals. So
Right.
yeah, that is how like a lot of companies are going digital. They are adopting the technology, like, available. And that when you do that, then like, you need a product managers. So I think the opportunity is definitely there. But even let's say when somebody like, sends me a DM on LinkedIn that, okay, hey, hi, hello, I'm interested in being a product manager, or like, want to land an internship. It purely boils down on the like, on like, the state of things in the company. Like,
Right.
let's say we need to have bandwidth, like, when somebody as a fresher is joining in a company,
Right.
like not every company would have a proper program for a like, for associate product manager. Because like, if you're purely hiring somebody on the basis of the analytical skills, they need to still develop a lot of the things, like, the things like business stakeholder management, understand the user, understand the market. So like companies like Flipkart, Amazon, they do have such programs, but a lot of these startups, they don't
Does
really.
Zomato
I
have
think
like provisions for APM? Like,
no, so not really. It hasn't been defined really. And I mean, I'd say that like, here the ratio of like, people who are fresh and product manager, it would be like, like, there is nobody such like that. So a
right.
lot of these people are from the entrepreneurial background. So I would say that, I mean, there's no reason to get like, demotivated, like,
Right.
that like a particular company is not having a proper product management program. But yes, there are ways to get into. You need to understand like, a few basic problems. And like, I mean, so see, what a product manager is essentially somebody who's like, like, super curious. He wants to know how things work, and that way he discovers like, how can he further optimize things. So I'd say that like, understanding like, I mean, I told you these are the five things which primarily work. So if you can do like, if you have a little bit of know-how of how these things work. See, you need to have your opinion when I say about design, that what is a good design and what is a shitty design, right?
Right.
And by that you need to be like really sure that, okay, this design, like there's like, I'm looking at one screen which is beautiful, right?
Right.
But the user flow is not clear. And there's another screen which is looking okayish, but it's very clear that what the user should do over there. So you need
Right.
to build that kind of opinion. Like, a very good thing can be like, you should like, look at the different apps you're using, and then try to optimize that. Okay, what can I further improve into this? So with that kind of mindset, like, you'll be intrigued that, okay, why are they using this in, in a particular way? And maybe like, if you are, let's say, from an engineering background, you know how to code, then I think it is a plus point for them. And these people who especially know how to code, they should rather work on the other skills which are like designs. So if you get any of these like, straight, then you're good. And one more thing can be like, being hands-on on data, like, learning basic SQL. So that would really help. Like in Zomato, nobody helps you to get the basic data. You have to be hands-on. So
Right.
yeah, these are the few things. So I mean, I think, and I personally feel that currently there are a lot of webinars like this going on, and like, you can really watch them. There are like tons of good articles on Medium. I mean, I personally do that myself. Like, even today, I would like, go and attend like, such webinars, read a lot of articles on Medium, and that is enough. I think. I mean, I think that will like, like, set you for the next milestone, which would be to maybe like, design a basic wireframe, like, download all these softwares. They're free of cost, right? And build your like, your knack for design, and your and again, the technical know-how, it's something which is there on Google. You can search what are the different stacks, how do these works, like, why people are using like, different databases like Redis, Kafka, what are their different purposes in the chain. And yeah, that's it. Like,
So, so
you
these
can
things,
read about, like, the hottest thing in the technical architecture, that is microservices. Why are people moving from the monolith to microservices, right? So
right,
these are the few things, if you are aware of, then what it reflects is that, okay, though you don't have any background in product management, but yes, you are curious, and you are someone who, if fed with proper, like, use cases and, like, problem statements, he will be able to drive things. So yeah, that is there.
so
I mean,
these
if you can.
things should, like you said, these things will definitely build skills. But like, would it help you in your chances to get a job? Because like again, like you said, companies have certain benchmarks in terms of like, either an MBA. I mean, not all companies have an MBA as a criteria, but then an MBA or a certain amount of experience in product roles. So a lot of people who are trying to get that first product role might not have all that on their
Hmm.
profile.
Hmm.
So would these things that you mentioned, like doing things on their own, help them? Like, would it improve their chances, like genuinely?
Yeah, yeah, of course, definitely. I mean, like, I had none of these, like, skill sets when I really got my job. And
Right,
it was, so, I mean, like, you never know what really impresses the, like, an interview. But, like, nowadays things are much more defined, and there are, I mean, as you said, there are certain, like, benchmarks which you have to meet. So
right,
again, it varies from company to company. Like, let's say, Google really makes it a mandatory thing that you are very good with your, like, coding skills. I
right,
mean, I think now it has changed a little bit, and I mean, they have a specific round with engineers, right? You have to impress them. So
right,
it varies from company to company. See, people, like, companies, like, making it a mandate that, like, you come from an MBA background, that is mainly to test that, like, you have a vigor for data, right?
right,
All these people who are coming from from B schools, they are very good with data. They can handle those stressful situations, like, like anything. So I
right,
mean, yeah, so you need to understand that what is the logic behind that, right?
right,
That why are they, like, making such kind of requirement. So I think that is something which you can anyway fulfill. And if again, like, breaking through in product is very would be very easy if you work with the startup. Like, the startups are always looking for youngsters who are, like, willing to do a lot. Like,
right,
again, like, as a product manager, you need to have different mindsets. You should be able to, like, I mean, that's how it goes. Like, you should have a heart of a designer, you should have a mind of a coder, and you should have a tongue of a diplomat, right? So
right.
that's a very common saying, that if you can manage that, you are, like, good to go.
Got it, got it. So, like talking about like the hiring process, I mean, there are like these common, like you said, common questions that we have. Like, if you have a favorite product and how you'd improve it, these are questions that are generally asked, right? So, like,
Hmm.
how was your, I mean, hiring process like when you got into?
Okay, so when I got into Zomato, like, the hiring process was actually pretty smooth. Okay, so I'll compare two different hiring processes. When I got into Oxygen, I had to give 7 rounds. Okay,
Okay,
so that was, like, it was exhausting. Like, like, one was a very basic round, understanding, like, trying to know that, like, if I do really have. See again, the interview process is there to, like, check a lot of things. One of them is that, like, your interest in the particular domain the company is, right?
right,
So, and you don't really have to be a subject matter expert, right? I
mhm,
mean, you just, so for me, like, going to a wallet company, all I had to do was just understand how wallets work. Like, what are open wallets, what are closed wallets, what are the different guidelines behind wallets, right? And what
right,
is the current ecosystem like, right? And then, of course, you have to be clear with your basics, that, like, what are the fundamental things you need to develop a product. Like, what kind of a team will you need? So the answer can be, you need a backend engineer, you need a front end engineer, you need a designer, right?
right,
And, like, these are the few very basic things they ask. I mean, you should know that, what is an API, how do APIs work, right? And everything is available on the market, like, on Google, right? So
right,
these things are there. And so for me, when I was transitioning into, from Oxygen to Zomato, it was very important. Like, it is very important for the candidate to really ace the questions about the past work which they've done. So I had to really tell them, explain them, because if you build something, then you can explain the shit out of it, right? So
right,
I really took them through the entire design journey, like, what the interface looked like, like, what kind of a backend did we build, whilst ensuring that I'm not leaking out any, like, information which is, like, very, like, crucial to the company. So you have to be very careful about that, that you
right,
don't really tell them a lot more than required. Then I think, like, some of the popular questions again, like, are that, like, what are the famous, like, what is the kind of app you like, and what do you improve, what can you improve on that. So while answering such questions, try to not really go for like the apps like Facebook or WhatsApp. If you can really improve them, good enough. But then I mean, that is a very tricky question. How can you improve WhatsApp? Your answers have to be backed by a lot of, I don't know, you can have some kind of data, some
Right.
kind of some kind of UX logic. So for me, it is more like I try to experiment with a lot of new apps. So that time I was reading trying to learn Italian. So I was trying a few apps to understand the languages. Like it was Babbel, Duolingo. So I
Right.
really like Duolingo. I explained them that why it is better than Babbel and this and that. So that really helped.
Right.
And apart from that, so every product management interview, like especially when you are transitioning to a new role from previous role, are I mean they give you a case. It's a problem statement, and you have to let's say define the requirement. So requirement gathering is a very important step of the product management. If it is done correctly, you can save a lot of time. And what happens if the requirement gathering is not complete? What would happen? Ultimately, there would be a lot of back and forths. The developer would ask you, okay, what happens in this scenario, or what happens in that scenario? Okay, or these are two conflicting states. So you need to be clear that you define each and everything. And yeah, so that was a task all about. I was asked to prepare like a documentation for an MVP, and I was asked to build a like a screen for where the rider gets where the rider can see the rating. So I did that. I wrote a 2 3 page documentation. I made some quick wireframes, and then just walked
This
them
is
through
all
the
happening
designs.
live. Like this is on the spot, right? All
No,
happening on.
this is not no, not on the spot. So you do get some time to build such elaborate the what say uh, cases.
Right.
Some of them are on the spot. I mean let's say, I mean especially Google does that a lot, right? They can just ask you, okay, you need to build a camera for elderly people. You need to build an app for people who are blind. So
Right.
there you just have to. So one of the things is that yes, these questions are quite outrageous. That how can you even do that in 5 minutes? But I think the key is to ask them the right questions. Like even when in Zomato, they were asking me different problem statements that let's say how can they optimize certain metric so the next step is not to just give abstract answers, but to think through and look out for the information which is not there. So as a product manager, you should try to know what you don't know. So
Right.
let's say if you're asking me to build an app for elderly people, I mean, sorry, if they're asking me to build a camera for the elderly people, I need to understand that what is the use case? What kind of camera are we talking about? Is it a mobile camera? Is it a DSLR? What kind of a budget range we're talking about? So that way, I mean, all they're looking is that how you are clearly defining your problem, cutting it into small pieces and then solving for each and different scenario, because you can't have a solution which matches all the different scenarios, right?
Right.
So the moment you do that, then the entire case develops. They will ask you cross questions, and then you have to be really good, quick about them. uh, like you know you can say that you have to be logical, yes, definitely, but stick to what you are trying to do. And that way the entire question, uh, I mean there's no correct answer, right? You
Right.
can of course solve it on case by case basis. So yeah, that happens.
Got it. Got it. So again, like for people, starting out on a job, like you mentioned, there are a few pillars. Like data is a
Hmm.
pillar, software is a pillar. So there they can obviously transition from one of these pillars into product, right? Like
Yes, 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 of course, definitely. So, see, let's say if you're a designer and you want to transition to product management,
right,
so understand that you have already aced one of the pillars. And see again, I mean, you need to define why do you want to become a product manager. What is currently you know, I mean, restricting you in your current capacity that you want to solve. You should not really want to become a product manager because it is a mini CEO or something like that. It's not all rosy, right?
right, right,
So you need to be really motivated to solve a particular thing. If
right,
I mean, like as a designer, maybe I would like to think that okay, yeah, maybe I can ensure that these designs are transition into the final product in a very in a much better way, right? And maybe I know how it happens, what it takes me to like solve a particular problem. Like maybe as a designer, I'm very good with the customers. I can talk to them. I know what the problems are. And then like things like working with the engineers, that becomes secondary. I mean, those are the things which you can really learn, right?
Right.
So you need to. I mean, see. I mean, it's very simple. Uh, I mean, you have to innately have problem solving skills. When I say problem solving skills, like what are the different business use cases you think are not being solved today or can be improved? If you have an idea around that, then like all you need is a few engineers to build that, right?
Right.
So, and so I mean, I think it's very important, for someone who is contemplating about moving to product management to constantly talk to them. That let's say I'm a designer, I know a product manager in my company. I would talk to him and understand that what really motivates him. I mean, to like really take a product management and work day in day out. You need to understand that like what goes inside out. A lot
Right.
of times what happens, candidates are just I mean, they are impressed by maybe the kind of salaries, the kind of responsibility you have, but then that's only the one side of the picture, and you need to understand that what exactly goes behind it, right? I mean, even a simple feature takes a lot of time for planning, of specking, of experimentation, data validation. So yeah, if that sounds interesting to you, then definitely you should go for that.
Right. Right. So, like for people who may not get product roles right away, I mean, these are alternate paths. Like, let's say
Yes,
that,
yes, yes. I mean, yes, I have talked to a lot of these like a lot of juniors and who are I mean, they feel they get a little heartbroken, right, when they are not able to get through product management, or let's say they in the campus placements also they tried their best to get a product management role, but they couldn't. So no need to feel bad about it. Like I mean, one of the things which I feel till date is that I mean of course now I'm way past that, but initially landing directly into product management is also a problem, right? I
right.
mean, if you transition from roles like data or software engineering, it's a bit easier for you to really get into the mix because you understand at least one part of it. So I think I mean in Zomato also I know a lot of people who are data analysts for over a year or so, and they I mean so I mean what happens all these different teams, they do contribute to the product, right?
Right.
And there is an interaction with the product manager at each of these cycles. So
Right.
if you really feel that, okay, I understand being a business analyst, I understand how things work in Zomato. I have a couple of ideas. I can talk to the engineers. I can I know how to solve these things. Then yeah, you should.
Right.
The next thing is that you're talking to another product manager, talking to the product VP, and just transitioning into it. They would
Right.
have a. I mean, they definitely have a proper criteria interview over there as well. But it is easy. I mean, it is not like the end of the world if you can't really crack into product management. And I think it's very important for a candidate to switch when they think they're ready, because things can easily go out of hand if you aren't really enough motivated, or you are lacking a few things in terms
Right.
of your understanding or anything like that. So I think yeah, you should definitely go for that, and there's no harm in being a business analyst or a designer or even an
Right.
engineer to begin with. Yeah.
Right. Right. So, for people who have time in their hand, let's say in the final year or
Hmm.
maybe a few months, so the what can they do? Like, one thing you mentioned is like there are so many resources out there, and maybe they can try building something. Like, what is a realistic goal they can have? Like, what is the realistic thing that they can spend their time doing? Like, maybe if they have a semester or a year left.
So I say first you start by understanding the product management role. And I think a lot of times we are not really aware of what
Right.
exactly is product management. People confuse it with building apps, giving shining demos. That's not it. So I'd
Right.
say best is that dial up a lot of your like uh, your seniors or anybody who know on LinkedIn. It's very easy to just DM them. I mean,
Right.
ask them, so I mean, I always, there are a lot of times that people are pinging me that, hey, here's my resume. Can you please get me through an internship?
Right.
So chances are pretty high that I won't even reply. So,
Right.
but if somebody tells me that, hey, I'm interested in product management, can you please walk me through that? What are the different aspects of it, and can you tell me how can I build them? So,
Right.
I mean, I would definitely call that guy, right, and then tell them that, dude, okay, it's pretty much possible to make this happen, and let's just do this. So again, ton of articles on Medium, interact with product managers, And once you do that, so I mean, like once you have an enough idea that what this role is all about, then I think you're in college, right? A lot of people do these hackathons, and they're very good with apps and websites. Just try to build something. I mean, maybe it can be a borrowed idea, something which already exists, but maybe you can replicate that, or maybe you can try to solve something on the campus itself, some service which is manual, and you could probably make it digital, right?
Right.
So maybe let's say you have your dhobi in the college, right? Maybe you can build a simple app for him, that wherein he can request, people can request that, okay, like dude, I have 4 clothes taken from my room, and you can schedule things. So that kind of idea can really work. I mean, it's very simple to build. And I mean, yeah, so again, you should take care, you should take help of your friends who are coding really well. And I think in a college setup, there are a lot of people who are very good with Photoshop. So yeah, there you have the designers. So
Right.
just sit with them, brainstorm ideas, go through a number of apps, a number of problems which people are trying to solve,
Right.
and yeah, just build something of your own. So what happens? It's very important that, I mean, see, it's not about that you're trying to build the next WhatsApp or the next Instagram. It's very important you to understand that, I mean, if I made an app, I know that what goes behind it, right? What is
Right.
there behind that screen? If I click something, what happens in the system? If you can understand that essence, or let's say understand how these digital products work, how internet works, these
Right.
are the very fundamental things. Once you do that, then yeah, I think you have a lot to talk about, in an interview. So a lot of time people don't even know, what happens, what is a database, what is a server, what do you mean by things are on cloud, right? So
Right.
just Google them up, understand, and in this process of building things, you understand that what is the importance of iteration, what is the importance of requirement gathering, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think the basis can be cleared this way. It's all about showing an interest.
Right.
Uh, yeah, yeah.
I think like college is a great time to develop this curiosity and like
Exactly,
a lot
exactly,
of time.
exactly. And now you see a lot of these guys who are coming up with startup in their third or fourth year only, and this is
Right.
the way, right? They do know that, and if you look at that, what they're building, they're not trying to build something which is novel, right? They
Right.
are just trying to ensure that there is a problem statement which can be solved for a different demography, right?
Right.
So yeah, in that process you learn a lot. That is something which is valuable.
Right.
Once you learn that, maybe then the next time, you, who knows, you build the next kick-ass original idea. Let's say these times of COVID,
Right.
everything is going remote. Maybe there are people who are working on something which really takes advantage of this, and they are working remote services. So who knows? So yeah, you have
Worst,
to.
like even in the worst case, if your idea doesn't work out, you have a lot of learnings which will obviously help you in your interview.
So it is very important for you to go through a failed product as well.
Right.
That, I mean, again, I think it's a very common saying, right? That it's not that like you know how you feel after a failure. It's how you get up again, right?
Right.
And always try to take the, there are always takeaways, even in a failure. You get to know that, what, I mean, even I've had a couple of failed launches, right?
Right.
People weren't prepared, teams were not informed well. So in that process, I've learned things, right? And you just make a check that the next time you don't repeat it. So it's an ongoing cycle, right? And
Right.
the iteration is the key.
Right. Great, Ashish. Like, thanks a lot for your time. I think we've covered a lot of things, got a lot of information out of you. So hopefully, people who will watch this can pick up something and apply it in their lives.
Great, great, awesome, awesome, nice.
Thanks, man. All the
Okay,
yeah.
yeah, thank you, thank you,
Bye.
bye.